Am I sharing a sound? Okay.
Recording in progress.
Welcome on board, everyone. So we just give about 2 more minutes to start. So please wait. All right, so welcome everyone and welcome back to Saturday for SPE 3.0 Technical Talk series. So today is our last Saturday of the month, whereby we're presenting you our last technical talk. So this program has been brought to you mainly by SPE APU Student Chapter and SPE Kuala Lumpur Young Professional Section, and many other student chapters and sections around the club. So long story short, today we are targeting the topic of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS. And so welcome on board, everyone, and let's get started. Next slide. Okay, so my name is Mariam Sindali. I am a final year Petroleum Engineering student and the head of communication of SPE APU Student Chapter. And today I will be your moderator. So let's go to today's agenda. So we will start today's session with a safety moment presented by my teammate Alex, then a membership awareness presented by my teammate Leonard. After that, we are moving to a team introduction that has been working to deliver to you this event today. After that, we are introducing our guest of honor today, the technical talk speaker for today, who will be speaking about the CCUS motivation, CO2 emission intensity, what is CCUS, technologies and costs, the benefit of CCUS, a case study, and to conclude, a way forward. After that, we're moving to a question and answer session where we advise you to drop your questions in the chat box during the meeting, and our technical team will assist you. So moving from the question and answer session, we prepared you a Kahoot game session that will be hosted by my teammate Dharmaswa. And after that, we are having a photo session where we advise all the participants to turn on the camera, put on a big smile, and use the virtual background that we have dropped you in the meeting chat box. So after that, we're having a feedback form where we ask you to please fill up a form to get your certificate of participation, and we finish with the closing remarks. So that's today's agenda. Let's move to the safety moment. So Alex, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex Gay. I'm the Secretary of SPE APU Student Chapter. Next slide. For today's health and safety moment, I'd like to talk about ergonomics. Ergonomics is made up of two big words, ergon meaning work and nomoi meaning natural law. Next slide. Ergonomics as a combination word is the science and the art of fitting the job and the workplace to the worker's needs. In other words, this means that making yourself comfortable wherever it is that you're working from. Please ensure that you are following the correct sitting posture. And I hope that all of us know about the 20 by 20 by 20 rule, which means that if you focus on your laptop or your phone for 20 minutes, please look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. Next. The world has been going through a pandemic for a while now. Taking the necessary precaution will not only protect yourself, but protect all the ones around you. Please continue to wear a mask, wear gloves, and wash your hands regularly. Whatever we do today and continue to do is what will allow us to be together when this is all over. Thank you. I'll pass it back on to Mariam for the membership line.
Thank you, Alex, for advising us today. And moving forward for the membership drive, Leonard, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mariam. And me, I am Leonard, and I'm the student president of SPE Kuala Lumpur University Malaysia Student Chapter. And allow me to explain and show you the benefit of an SPE membership. Next slide, please. So why do we join SPE? For your information, our SPE KL section receives the Section Excellence Award in 2020. And moving on to the next slide. To list out, at the left side, the 9 icons under the white arrow there, those are the student benefits. And on the right side are the professional benefit. And allow me to bring you through the student benefit and the professional membership benefit. So for students, we get to join the League of Volunteers. We also can attend local section meetings and even discover or maybe participate or listen and learn from the Distinguished Lecturer Program. And of course, in terms of the community energy for me, which is a CSR, corporate social responsibility for the for corporates and also for the younger generations, to boost them in the confidence of STEM education as well as giving back to society. Of course, beyond that, in energy for me, other communities includes e-mentoring, which is we get to connect with other SPE members and learn from them. And also SPE Connect, where this is more on a peer-to-peer mentoring, where different people at the same age, we share experiences together. And how do we stay current with the latest technology? We have Journal of Petroleum Technology, JPT, One Petrol, SPE Online Education, and of course, some on-demand distinguished lectures are available there too. And not to mention, not needless to say, what is the SPE event, the flagship events such as conferences, competitions, and so on and so forth. Now for the professional membership, we have mentoring programs, ambassador lectures, distinguished lecturer series, of course, also volunteering opportunities in SPE, where through volunteering, we increase our visibility to professionals and organizations. And of course, we also have free education and learning opportunities, PE, practicing engineer or professional engineer accreditation, YP development programs, which is young professional development programs, professional networking, trainings, workshops, technical career guidance programs and talks, and of course, community of practice and free access to SPE paper, 6 papers annually. Moving on to the next slide. This is the posters of the previous events held under SPE KL section. We have various events such as members in transition to show how how students can continue their journey in SPE through professional membership. And of course, SPE KL Young Professionals sharing life on the rig. And of course, another one is thriving in energy transition through emissions management and conferences such as Reset. And of course, distinguished lecturers, youth for youth sharing sessions and community outreach or even crowdfunding for those affected by the pandemic. Moving on to the next slide. So as I have explained earlier, this is how a free student membership look like. We receive mentoring or we open up opportunities for scholarship, fellowship, petrol bowl, student paper contests, and career guidance, and also virtual field trips. All of this was free because it was waived by Chevron. It is only 10 USD and is waived by Chevron internationally. Moving on to the next slide. So, professional membership, as I have explained in the earlier session, it comes at a little bit higher price. And for our section, we are having some extra benefit for Malaysians. To list out 1, 2, 3, which will be shown in the next slide too. There will be reduction of fee by 50% for Malaysian. And second, is a free renewal of membership for those who lost their job. And thirdly, insurance program for SPE member. And this is how the table of fees look like after the benefit. And of course, moving on to the next slide. This is the same thing as shown just now, which is more in a point form manner that we can see it as usual. Allow me to elaborate again. We reduce the fee by 50% for Malaysians, free renewal of membership for those who lost their job, and of course, insurance program for SPE member. We can even compare the prices in the table over there. And moving on to the next slide. So, not just this extra benefit, we are also opening up some lucky draws. What's happening is every month we will choose 2 winners. One is a lucky draw for physical gift, and another one is an opportunity to present at one of SPE KL activities and events. And so it will boost our publicity or visibility to professionals and organizations. Moving on to the next slide. So this is a list or a map of how a student membership will look like, and of course, comparing it to professional membership. And after that, we list out the extra benefits, which is shown here under the middle part of the slides. And of course, last thing, allow me to do a final push or final encouragement. For student membership, it is free. And for professional, it is 15 USD and to 110 annually, depending on which year we are at. And of course, I believe after the extra benefit, it will be very affordable. And without further ado, register today and send a confirmation email to Miss Fatime with the title Membership Lucky Draw before 24th of December once we are registered. For your information, Miss Fatime is our SPE KL membership chairperson. And moving on. Yes, and I think what we have experienced in the past is just recently ended is our flagship event, SPE ATCE, Annual Technical Conference and Exhibition. And I believe the in-demand lectures could be accessed soon using our membership. So don't forget to join membership. Our benefit spans beyond our limits. And moving on to the next slide. Thank you so much for listening to our membership drive. SPE is indeed a world of opportunity. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you. So that was for the membership drive. Moving forward. So now I will be introducing the team that works for today's session. So we are a team of 5 international students. We have our leader here, Shalita, from SPE ITS. Then there's me from SPE APU Student Chapter. We have Anurag from SPE IIT Student Chapter, Shamita also from SPE IIT, and Dhamma Wasnya from SPE UR. So this is the team behind today's event. And so moving forward. So now we will be presenting today's speaker. So for today's session, we have Dr. Luigi Saputelli. He's a Reservoir Engineering Expert Advisor. So a little background of Dr. Luigi. He is a Reservoir Engineering Expert Advisor with 30 years of experience as a reservoir drilling and production engineer in PDVSA, SA, ADNOC, Hess, and Halliburton. He's also a senior researcher and lecturer where he published more than 100 industry papers, 6 patents, and 3 books on digital oil field, reservoir management and real-time production optimization. Dr. Saputelli is actively volunteering in SPE since 2003 and is a recipient of the 2015 SPE International Production and Operation Award. He currently serves as a managing partner in front tender and upstream energy services firm in Houston. Dr. Luigi, welcome on board.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for the people in Asia, East Asia, and here in Abu Dhabi, Middle East, it is afternoon, 4 p.m., and morning also in the US. So today I will be talking about one point of view about the way ahead of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. As mentioned, my name is Luigi Saputelli, and I work with Frontender. It's a small consulting firm in Houston, and we provide the services on digitization, alternatives, and energy transition. So the agenda for today, we will be discussing about what is motivating us to talk about CCUS. I will introduce the concept of CO2 emissions intensity. I will also talk to you about what is CCUS, and we will try to focus mostly on the CCUS and utilizations for the upstream industry, some technologies for carbon capture and sequestration, and the associated costs, the benefit of CCUS, and also a small case study we prepare in order to compute carbon emissions and efficiency across the upstream. And then I will try to leave you with some ideas on the way forward. So the key motivation of us talking today about carbon capture and utilization, it has to do with, we are all familiar and aware of this movement that is happening in a certain strength more in the last year about carbon reductions, emissions reduction, and greenhouse gas reduction. So we know that from the so-called Paris Agreement of 2015, the industry is moving towards a decarbonization era. And if we think about it, this has happened not only in the last 10 years, but in the last 200 years. If we think, initially we were using coal and wood at the beginning of the 18th century. And then as we move more into the industrialization, more use of coal replaced the wood. And then by the end of the 19th century, oil started to appear and it became commercial in the 20th century. And as we move into the different type of oils, we have seen that now we're talking more about having a less carbon intensity. There has been an increasing trend in the use of natural gas, and we see the future, it will be talking about hydrogen and so forth. So if you see the whole trend, it's all about reducing the carbon content in the fuel we use for energy consumption and the different elements, and learning how to transport it, treat it, and reutilization. Now, if we continue the same, we see the plot in here. This has been let's say the annual net oil and gas income coming from oil. We have seen that almost $1.2 trillion in the cycle of 2011-15, all the way to 600 in the billions in the 2016 and 18. If we combine with gas, we're still close to the $1 trillion per year. This is the income that the national oil companies and the international oil companies perceive, okay? Now, you are aware that also this income for the national oil companies is more than that. It becomes the GDP, a great portion of the GDP comes from the oil and gas income. Therefore, it is quite relevant to think that these elements are part of the day-to-day and the most important point in the agenda. If we continue to do the same thing with no additional changes in the stated policies and things like that, this trend will continue to go back to the 2011 numbers, and it will even reach perhaps close to the $2 trillion per year in the 2030 and 2040. So this is assuming the same demand scenarios that we're having today. Now, under the so-called Sustainable Development Scenario, which is supported by United Nations and also in accordance to the Paris Agreement, there will be a drastic reduction in this income because of the so-called carbon tax inputs. Yeah, so that if we and the reduction that also oil and gas, the hydrocarbon products, will be reduced with alternative energies. So we're talking about by 2036, probably like a 50% reduction of the overall income. You see here that gas income does not get reduced, so it's basically preserved and taking a different level of activity. So there is a number of motivations and mandates that are occurring and that we cannot ignore, that we cannot be isolated with. So we as petroleum engineers, we need to think and we need to be more agile on redesigning the next steps for our oil industry. Is oil going away? I mean, not for the ones that are currently in this talk or your children, but it's definitely going to be different. It's definitely going to be, we're in a transformation point. And the immediate priority is to reduce the environmental footprint in the operations from extraction. And also that includes also being more lean and getting better net profits per unit of barrels and understanding where the major carbon footprints are occurring. The concept of CO2 emissions intensity, it is how many kilograms of CO2 per barrel do we generate in order to produce a barrel of oil. If we see the plot on the left, this is the emissions per barrel of BOE for all the productions that the world has today. So we're close to 100 million barrels per day. And we can see that the top quartile performance will produce about 60 kilograms of CO2. This is the so-called scope 1 and 2. And above 100, we're talking about a number that is completely inefficient. So basically, we can say that 1/4 or 1/3 of the global production is basically producing a highly inefficient quantities of CO2 per barrel of oil. Similar quantity we can see with for every BOE of natural gas produced. The world produces today close to 40 CF a day. And in gas, we are producing about 80 kilograms of CO2 per BOE. So it looks like we produce more CO2 per BOE of gas, but in reality, when we compute the CO2 per million BTU, in both cases, gas is more efficient in terms of CO2 generation. Okay, so globally, scope 1 and 2, there is an estimation of 5,300 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year on the scope 1 and 2. The scope 1 and 2, I think you have seen this in previous talks, is the emissions that come directly from the activities of generating oil and gas and includes everything from drilling, transportation, conversion, and taking it to the market. The scope 2 is more related to the generation of energy, the transport, the transfer of electricity, and all this. So all these elements are important to see that we generate 53 million tons of CO2 just before the final user burns the oil. Okay, and we will see and associate these numbers with another numbers related to the actual burning of oil. And this is it. So how much do I know that the CO2 emissions of intensity 3? So scope 3 is the actual emission coming from the oil and gas combustion. So in order to generate the final energy to the user, converting to electricity, converting into gasoline, and then driving, etc. So I think you all know 1 barrel of oil is 159 liters or 42 gallons. If we consider a normal oil that weighs about, with a density of 0.85 grams per cc, we take that 1 barrel of oil weighs about 135. However, when this oil is burned, is mixed with oxygen and others, we generate about 405 kilograms of CO2. This one varies for different type of oil. It can go from 401 all the way to 440 if it is a heavy oil, all the way to 540 kilograms of CO2 if it is coal. Okay, and gas, which is cleaner, is 320 CO2 per BOE. When we take it into terms of million BTU, these numbers are also in the same proportion. Yeah? If you see here, the world on a yearly basis as of 2020 was generating from the energy related emissions about 30,000 million CO2, or an equivalent of 30 gigatons. Okay, when we add this with the scope 1 and 2, the previous slide, the all oil and gas scope 1 and 3 is close to 35 gigatons of CO2 per year. So I want you to keep these numbers in mind, because when we're talking about CO2 flooding and CO2 reductions emission, and people say, I'm going to save so many millions of CO2 equivalent per year, I want you to understand in which percentage, in which numbers are we showing these elements, okay? And next, okay. How do we calculate the GNG greenhouse gases emission intensity of scope 1 and 2? Well, there are a number of studies, and some of them will go from a high level based on the level of activities. And we see in terms of intensity, Saudi Arabia, although it has to do with the total amount of CO2 creation divided by the total production, the UAE, Russia, Nigeria, and Venezuela. So these are some comparison numbers. So then if you consider that in our case, we sell oil that is 405 kilograms per BOE, we can see Venezuela, for example, is almost 50% in addition of the oil sold is used in order to produce the same oil. And we see countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia, we're talking about 12-15% of the overall sold oil and gas is used in scope intensities 1 and 2. The energy transition, I think you also discussed this in the previous talks about the evolution of the different companies. We can see that many companies are very concerned about reducing the carbon footprint, and they are mostly talking about the scope 1 and 2. Okay, for example, Shell in the recent article, they say we'll start revealing how much carbon is released into the energy products. So, and then the claim is that it will reduce carbon footprint by 20% in year 2035, cutting the CO2 emissions of 50%. When they say cutting CO2 emissions, they refer to scope 1 and 2, because they will continue to sell the oil, which is that will be producing and generating a scope 3 carbon emissions. Companies like ExxonMobil announced the creation of a new business to commercialize low carbon tech portfolio. Total, 35 gigawatts of energy projects in different stages, committed to invest 20% of its 2021 capex in low carbon technologies. Equinor, they have invested in wind farms and solar farms, ENI, BP, etc. When you take all these numbers and compare it to the actual reduction, for example, remember, we're talking about here like 3.5 million tons. How much is this as part of the overall global production? We were talking about 3,500 million tons. So we're talking about here less than 0.1% in this submersion of company, which are good contributions, but I just want you to have a feeling of the numbers that we're talking. In general, IOCs are evolving to integrated energy companies to be net zero global targets. So some of them, like Repsol, by year 2050, is pledging to have net zero in scope 1 and 2, and also to have net zero of the hydrocarbon and energy sold to the clients. So that means a big commitment, because if you're selling about 1 million or 3 million barrels, you're talking about big numbers here of having this scope. That means investing in a number of projects that will not only offset and reduce the hydrocarbon emissions used in producing the oil, but also avoiding or having a credit on the carbons that we are selling to the customers. Similar, Equinor pledging to be net zero. BP has claimed to be net zero and 50% on the scope 3. ENI minus 80% and reducing 55% the intensity. Shell and Total Energies, so being pledging to be net zero in the EU. So these are big commitment and big numbers for the companies. IOCs claiming to reduce carbon emissions. And there is not also a pledging in the future. So it has happened in the last 2 decades at least. I have seen this number growing. And if you see here, the number of the investment happening by the IOCs, Total, Equinor, Shell, we are close in a global basis, close to $14 billion in projects. And here we're talking about the same thing, green investment, the type of investment that companies are doing, wind, solar, advanced transportation, biofuels, other renewables, etc. And we can see here CCS and energy storage as one of the key projects happening in the green investment technology. Now, this number, the $14 billion, is still a very shy number with respect to the overall industry investment. Okay, keep that in mind. So, what is CCUS? CCUS stands for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And we have here is a suite of technologies, a process. We want to capture CO2 from an industrial process or from biomass fuel power stations or directly from the air. If the utilization is not going to happen in the same site where we need it, we're going to also, it involves the process of compression and transport. And the use may be used for the use capture for in many feedstock for a variety of products, or also for another services. The storage means permanently storing the CO2 in an underground geological formation, onshore or offshore. Okay. So what are the different CO2 capture methods and costs? So there are a variety. Some of them can be related to the direct from nature capture, or the other ones might be more like technology driven. For example, negative emissions means, for example, afforestation and reforestation is a method for capturing CO2 and increasing the potential. If we do this, is close to 0.5 to 3.6 CO2 per year. So we're talking about here almost 10%. Remember the number, 35 gigatons. Yeah, and in here the cost of this is roughly $5 to $50 per ton of CO2. And in there you can see the number of highlights. For example, you have to dedicate high land and water use. You have to use the lower period of storage than geological storage. I mean, you have a very limited time, because there is a limited time that you can do deforestation. You have to have saturated forests over decades and centuries, and the storage can be threatened by fire, drought, or pest. So imagine, so you can easily destroy what could happen in there. So similar, there is biomass energy capture, also in a similar price, 0.5 to 5 gigatons per year. It is more expensive, but that you can have a limited availability of sustainable biomass and secure. But in general, it has a similar concept, a similar drawbacks, that you have uncertainty in the scalability, a lot of land use, and you will still have the problems of regeneration of the CO2. Biochar is another type of biologically capturing of the CO2, also in the range of 30 to 120. Is basically doing a certain composting of the bio materials and preserving them on soils, and this could have an additional positive effect on soil fertility. So it has a very good potential. Direct air carbon capture and storage is basically the current technology. The potential is infinite. That's why we don't put it in here. The cost is very high, between 100 to 300. It's all about using a variety of technologies in order to dissolve the CO2 available in air, mix it with certain chemicals, both either amines or any other type of catalytics material, in order to absorb the CO2 from the air. It doesn't require much land use, and today there are certain technology challenges because the costs are high. Soil carbon sequestration, also in the range of 2 to 5 gigatons. The US cost is between 45 to 100 tons of ton of CO2. The soil will be saturation after 100 to 100 years, so it has a good potential in terms of a lot of utilization, and it increases soil fertility. And another technologies that are more into the research area and are coming along through time, and these prices in general, they might be biased because of the low utilization so far, enhanced weathering and ocean alkalinity, and also ocean fertilization. They are in the range of, promised to be in the range of $14 to $400 per ton of CO2. So there is a variety, and this list may not be extensive. There may be another technologies that are quite effective for carbon capture methods. So in general, when we have related to what we do, is that we sell oil so that they can be used in combustion in industrial purposes, and we even use that in the oil industry. So a number of CO2 capture process may also happen in the combustion process itself, and there are certain ways where we can apply this. There is the most common one is to have the post-combustion, where we have coal is used to power a certain turbine or generator. Then we have the combustion, and from the combustion we perform CO2 separation. We talk about our next slide about this, how this CO2 separation happen, and then you will separate nitrogen and oxygen, and the remaining CO2 can be reused in compression or dehydration. Another way is to be in the process of called pre-combustion, where when we are gasifying coal and biomass, we use steam in order to shift and clean up the CO2 separation. And this one will generate a stream of clean CO2 that can also be used for compression and dehydration, and the remaining can be used for power and heat. Another one is oxy-combustion. So basically, it's another type of post-combustion type, basically using air. From the power heat, we inject additional oxygen, which can generate direct CO2 from the carbon generating the power heat. And there is a number of industrial processes where coal, gas, biomass, and other raw material can be used in order to separate gas, ammonia, cement, and other solids, even steel, where CO2 can be separated from these main elements. Okay, so all of these are a very a complete world, and if you are a chemical engineer or a production engineer, this is an area for you for fascination, and mostly for petroleum engineers. We would like to understand this process so to see how we can affect our environment in what's happening around us. So in the process of separation, this is basically, imagine the exhaust from a power station. This one is combined, the CO2 binds with amines, these amines, and this one, the waste gases will go through an outside, basically the nitrogen and O2. The combined amine CO2 mix will go into a stripper unit with heat, and this heat will separate where the CO2 will go to by gravity on the top, and the amines will go into a regeneration cycle in order to come back to the original absorber unit. So this is one of the oldest processes for CO2 generation. It is expensive, but with the proper design and number, just the generation itself can create CO2 for less than $20 per ton of CO2. In the utilization, we will be talking mostly about CO2 for EOR. And this is, we are all in petroleum engineers. This is what we do. This is our core of our business. Yeah. So basically, the CO2 flooding has been used for decades in many cases around the world, particularly mixed with water. And the reason because we mix it with water is because CO2 itself cannot do all the job or may not be enough in quantities, in commercial quantities, to drive the whole process because of the cost. So the way that it happens in the porous media, we may have the so-called high water or low residual of oil to water saturation. So we can see these isolated droplets of oil that they will not flow because of the relative permeability of oil at this water saturation may be high. In some cases, we find that reservoirs at original conditions, the ROZ or the residual oil zone has a very high residual oil saturation for that amount of initial water saturation. And that means that at this residual oil saturation, the oil will not flow. By mixing oil and CO2, we'll basically make different processes around the oil, basically allowing the oil to coalesce, to swell, and to change certain properties that would allow the oil to get closer to each other and to create even a more favorable condition of oil for moving, until then the oil will expand and moving towards the producing well. And this production, of course, whatever we inject in the reservoir, everything will come back to the surface. With vapor liquid extraction, we will require more sophisticated metallurgy around the wellbores that we have here, because there will be a very highly corrosion environment of water, oil, and oxygen coming into the oil. And perhaps we will also have H2S. We will need to have a good separation of the gas, hydrocarbon gas, the CO2, the liquid, and the liquid, oil, and water to be separated. And by having hopefully an efficient process of CO2 compression, water suck, and mixing and injection, this process can be highly sustainable. Okay, just to give an idea, imagine that you have a CO2 cost, and when we say here this is the cost of the CO2 that we import to the field. So this could be typically in the range of $20 to $60 per ton. And this injection by historical performance or laboratory analysis typically will give you between 0.3 to 0.6 tons of CO2 per every barrel of oil. So this is the total yield. You will need to inject. And of course, at the beginning of the production, this number will be very low because you're producing a lot of oil and you haven't injected too much. But as you go more and more into the mature stages of the CO2 injection, this number will go to 0.6 to 1 ton, 2 tons of CO2 per every barrel of oil until your process becomes anti-economic. So imagine if you buy CO2 for $20 per ton and you recover at this rate, that means that you are adding an extra cost to your EOR process that goes between $6 and $36 a barrel. So you need to add this to whatever cost you originally had in your oil field. So it means that if as long as the oil price is above of all your costs, you will have a profitable business. Now, you say, oh, it's very expensive to do CO2 for EOR because I'm adding this. Now, imagine, compare this to the CO2 storage in saline aquifers, which I will not talk today about this because, at the moment, I'm mostly interested in CO2 sequestration for EOR. If you inject CO2 in a saline environment, you will probably get it safe there for 1 million years, but for sure you will not get any money back. At least if you do this, you safely store CO2, you safely sweep oil, you produce it safely, and the profit is the difference between your additional cost and your oil price to make it in a sustainable way. Now, it doesn't mean that at the surface, we're still going to have the same problems. We're still going to have the same, let's say, target, how to make the downstream process even more efficient and provide the energy supply for the society that we work for. Okay? So some facts about the CCUS. For example, the carbon capture and storage has been mainly driven by the decarbonization targets. Okay, the top countries that produce more oil around the world, they say the top 6 emitters, they say we will be into the net zero targets. And we have seen it in the previous slides. Not only the IOCs, but also the NOCs are pledging to have this one. Now, this one not only comes because of the Paris Agreement, but because also investor pressure and changing consumer behavior are also driving their corporation to set these aggressive targets. The technology is not going to be only one. We're going to have to need multiple technologies addressing the carbon capture sequestration that will be either based on technology or based on nature-based elements. The CCUS projects have been driving the technology applications. For example, today, the CCUS projects, about 21 large-scale CCUS projects operating around the world, sum up a capacity of about 42 million tons per year, okay? And these 42 million tons, can you make in your mind how much are we talking here in terms of the overall scope 1, 2, and 3? This is 42 divided by 35,000 million tons per year. So we're talking about peanuts number, very small numbers of CCUS projects, but it's a good starting point. 21 large projects, the industry is learning and all that. Now, we also have some pilot projects for direct air capture and bioenergy with CCS and CCUS. These two numbers, these are piloting technologies. The overall will add up close to 44 million tons. The majority of the projects has happened in the US. Over 50% of the projects are in the US, more than and based on what we look ahead, there is plans to have 2 times the CCSU projects in the next 10 years. So there are firm plans that we have 21. 10 years from now, we're going to have 60 projects, 2 times more in the following year. Most of the new large-scale CCUS are in the power generation, because why? Is the most convenient way to capture the CO2 wherever it happens. But the difference is that the original ones, these 21 large projects, the majority were in the oil and gas sector. Now here, the majority are going to be in the power generation sector. Currently, 6 large-scale projects are under construction, which is going to add 10 million tons per year, expected to be operational in the next 2-3 years, which we will reach this 42, we will go to 52. And we're going to reach, as we say, 2 times more in the next 10 years. However, if we want to get close to the 3,500 million tons, for a scope 1 and 2, how many projects do we need? We need about 52 times in the next 30 years. So if we want to achieve the carbon emissions reduction in the next 30 years, just by carbon capture, we're going to need about 52 times the number of projects that we need today. Okay. Now, there is another trade-off here, is that CCUS projects by themselves, they are not economical. So in North America, about 85% of the projects that have been occurred so far, they have benefit because of policy instrument and support schemes. So that's why it is quite important to think that any carbon emission reduction in the following years will need the support of government, lawmakers, and lobbyists, and also the investment. So it will not happen by itself unless there is either these incentives or the incentive of the CCUS for EOR. Okay, there are other users that for the building this new economy. We know that CO2 may come from all these different sources: fossil fuel, biomass, air, industrial processes, etc. And there are 2 types of uses. The one that we can have the direct use, in which in the direct use there is no chemically altered CO2, and the conversion, where it can be used as fuels. You can generate methane, methanol, gasoline from CO2, which is quite good. It's still not commercially possible, but it is a way to reutilization of CO2 as chemicals, intermediates, and also for building material, especially cement materials, filling materials, concrete, etc. And for the direct use, we are mostly familiar with the so-called the heat transfer. If you drink sodas, Coca-Cola, and other products, you are drinking CO2 as well, for welding, medical uses. So there is certain use. However, it's not that the volume required is not that important. So we need to find more uses. The most dramatically consumer, as we will see in the following slide, of CO2 is the EOR process. So we will see the magnitude of how much we need in order to generate EOR. So in this case, we see EOR appears here in the family of a solvent. Solvent is basically it's like a soap, or a dry soap. It is used a lot in dry cleaning. It is used a lot in the decaffeination, if you are crazy enough to have decaf coffee. And you can also use it for enhanced oil recovery. So this is a summary of the large-scale CCUS facilities operating and in development. So as we see in the last from 2012 to 2015, there was a decline in investment in looking ahead. And after 2016-17, there was a push to ramp up for 30 new projects. So all these new projects will add up in many of the projects that we will see. Remember, we're talking about 42 million tons per year, so we're going to ramp up to almost 3 times that. Okay, so now I will talk to you about the model that we developed in order to build an EOR, a CO2 EOR model that integrates upstream sector all the way from well and tanks to see what are the magnitude of CO2 and CO2 EOR improvement options that we will have for a typical field development plan. So we have in this model, we consider all the upstream elements from rigs, natural flow wells, producers and injectors, activities connected with the drilling, field development planning, etc. We have all the gathering centers capabilities, from multi-phase flow, from wells to flow lines, activities connected from combustion, and also events. Then we have the liquid streams and the upstream end users. We computed a number of key numbers. For example, how much emissions can we generate if we have a company of 3.5 million barrels? So several Gulf Coast and several countries around the world are within this range, 2 to 3 to 4 million barrels. So you can make the numbers. Remember the 4 or 5 kilograms per BOE. So this number is directly related to it. So a company that produces 3.5 generates 764 million tons per year. So if 3.5 is close to the 2%, so also the emissions will be close to the 2%. But it will all depend on, as we say, scope 3 is the hydrocarbon energy that the final user will consume. But then you have a scope 1, which is all the extraction, flaring, methane, refinery, export. And scope 2, and this will be the final emissions. So what we can do as petroleum engineers is basically affecting this. What others can do, process engineers, the new refinery engineers, the new energy engineers of the future, is also affecting how we consume this scope 3. The model allows us to, we're publishing this paper by the end of the month, and you can also see there will be a number of energy emissions intensity in E&P from field development, exploration, production operations, and all of this will be creating a number of emissions intensity and emission consumptions. So all these numbers can be discussed later in a future element if you are interested in. So what are the results? So basically, imagine this company that we mentioned, the 3.5 million barrels, and what will be the impact of producing with or without CCUS process? So if we have an EOR process and we plug the numbers that are mostly accepted in terms of gain of CO2 barrels, we're talking about in this particular examples, we dedicated about 30% of the well stock of the company to CO2 flooding, okay? And we utilize a normally established gain number of about 400 kilograms of CO2 per barrel utilization efficiency. So basically, for every kilogram, or for every 400 kilogram of CO2, we recover 1 additional barrel of oil. And we increase the production about 30% of the production EP. So these are common numbers that we see in the CCUS. I worked before in the San Andres project in the Seminole County in the US. It's one of the oldest CO2 injection flooding available in the world. And so far, there are more than 30 different cases in the SPE literature. So you will see that these numbers are reasonable. As I say, this is quite a mature CO2 flooding, and you can consider this number will also vary across the life of the field. So if you do that, you will increase production 9% throughout the life of the field by affecting 30% of the wells. This is associated because of CO2 water injection, that your water production will increase from almost 2 million to over close to 4 million, depending on the water efficiency and all that. We have sensitivities in the following slide. GOR will also increase. The CO2 will alter the properties of the oil, and you can also have either an accelerated decline in the later life of the field. Now, this is a general, and I want you to have this picture in your mind before you go there. You see this is the life of the field of a 20-year life of a 3.5 million company. These are all the numbers in terms of CO2 tons per year. In drilling and completion, the new wells, which we were talking about between 200 to 300 wells per year, we are going to generate at the current price, at the current efficiencies, about 950,000. So about 1 million tons of CO2 per year. The gathering centers, the new gathering centers, about 1.6 million. Water treatment, about 70. Booster station. So the scope 1 emission is only 6 million, and the overall project is about 8.5 million tons per year. Now, remember that we said we're going to inject about 400 kilograms of CO2 per BOE. So this one requires that we need to buy about 38 million tons of CO2 per year. So basically almost 4 to 5 times more CO2 we have to bring it fresh from the outside if we want to commit and increase the production for about 9% of the overall process. This is because the overall scope 1 and 2, they are not enough for the overall CO2 project. So that means that we can easily create a net zero, or we can easily contribute to net zero projects if we use it and consider CCUS for EOR. The problem is to make it at the right price, at the right element for both, for the capturing and the utilization. Okay, these are all some additional sensitivities of the CO2 emissions. For example, if you go into the blue one is the 3 million scenario, the 4 million scenario, and the 5 million scenario. So you can increase up to 31% more emissions when you go from 3 to 5. And this is because the more oil you produce, the more at the same rate, 405 kilograms per BOE, you're still going to produce more. Now, higher water cut, if we are able to control, if we are able to use good reservoir management practices, if you are able to arrest decline from high water cut, we are able to produce and contribute. Look at this, almost 50% of the CO2 emissions can be related to this water cut control and water cut management. ESP wells in this water flooding field, it contributes close to 11% versus having gas lifted wells. The CO2 emissions, wells dedicated to IOR. So the more IOR you do, okay, all the way to 50, you also contribute. In this case, the IOR is related to the chemical EOR instead of CCUS EOR. And so forth. There are a number of sensitivities that we did in this area to see the overall picture at the life of the field. Okay. In general, if we do CO2 injection, remember the EOR costs between $30 to $500 per ton. In this case, we consider plant cost will cost about $120 per ton. And we were using the cost of the CO2 in the range of $40 per ton. So in this case, with the oil between $50 and $77 per barrel, we see also close to 10% additional revenue. So this could be, if we're thinking about this of a national oil company or thinking of a country, a CCUS project will bring also additional revenue for the country. Not only profit, but revenue and cost that will create and motivate and promote the in-country value related to that particular company. And we introduce two indicators that are measured to see the importance. One is the so-called the rebalancing index, which is basically the CO2 purchase divided by the scope 1 and 2. And as we see here, we were talking about almost 5 times the rebalancing index, and it goes down because at the end of the life, we produce more scope 1 and 2 than at the beginning of the life. But on average, we have close to 5 to 6. And the two numbers here, they showed here the utilization of the carbon units. Yeah. Another KPI that we introduced is the carbon improvement index, which is what will be the NPV of the overall company if I use CCUS, an energy efficiency project, divided by the base case NPV. And we can see that in many cases we can improve in terms of energy efficiency OPEX, we can go to between 3 to 4%. And in terms of CCUS pricing, if the CCUS pricing is around 50 to 100, we are talking about close to 9 to 10% carbon improvement index. And to finalize, I would like to leave you some words for the way forward, and basically focusing in 3 messages for you, young professionals. The first one is awareness, skills, and engaging. Continue to learn and monitor the trends on carbon capture and utilization. If you are interested about the energy transformation topics, make sure that you acquire the from light to deep skills and capabilities. This will improve your marketability and your career in the short term. And that could involve a number of topics, from new technologies for IOR, EOR, because there will continue to be pressure to produce at lower cost and more efficient from the oil and gas fields. Think about what will be the ways to decarbonize fuels and supply all the way to the user. Remember that we sell energy and we sell fuel, not just oil. So oil can be transformed in any way before it gets to the final user. Think about ways to be more efficient and less contaminant materials and processes. So it's not only about energy use, but also the materials that we use in the oil and gas. Are they environmentally friendly? Are they reusable? Are they more efficient? Are they cost efficient? In all the ways, leverage digital transformation and analytics. Think about the bottom line. Think about the numbers. Think about the second and third effect between cause and effect of things before they happen. And this is a vast number of topics. So have an overall view and see what is interesting to you. See where is your passion and take it. If you are a very good reservoir engineer of primary and water flooding, feel free to stay doing to what you are, because you will be needed also for the next 20, 30 years. So don't feel shy or ashamed that now people are talking about hydrogen and oil is going to disappear and all that, because this is the same what I have heard 30 years ago when I started in the industry. Okay. And also feel free also to engage, promote and encourage new projects on decarbonization, CCUS, and as relevant for your work and your country. Okay. And with this, I'd like to thank you. I'm open for any questions from your side.
Thank you, Dr. Luigi, for this amazing presentation. for talking about CCUS and explaining to us the CO2 in enhanced oil recovery and the pricing too, and also highlighting some facts in the carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So now we're gonna move to the question and answer from the audience. We have the first question from Abdullah from Qatar University. So he asks you, Qatar has been utilizing MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether from CO2, and it has been going well. So why didn't CCUS wasn't a trend in the industry before?
Well, it has not been it has been a trend. It has been increasing ever since I got into the oil industry in 30 years ago, and it's been increasing. CO2 generation, capture, and the same as hydrogen is being used a lot in midstream and downstream processes. It is normal. Now, being the theme of the investor and being the theme in the key topic in the agenda of a board of directors, this is probably happening more in the last years. Yeah. I don't know if it solved the question, but let me know if not.
Yeah, I think you have answered the question. And we have another question from the same person. He asks you, CCUS is reflected to be able to have 90% efficiency in the upcoming future. But according to the chart, there will be an increase in CO2 emissions. How will they be able to reach the aim if there is always be surge in CO2?
There's always, if you say, if there is always going to be a surge or a
according to the chart, there will be an increase in CO2 emissions. So how will we be able to reach the aim and the goal if there will be always surge in CO2?
I think that as we saw in one of the slides, and there is a study, the same study from the EIA, there is always a cost to every CO2 molecule that we want to capture. Yeah. So there might be, for example, we can capture, I think, almost 700 million tons per year at many prices. So there are some prices that we can get it. For example, the easiest will be separation from natural gas. You can do it for less than $10 per ton. But as you start going to more like capturing from combustion processes and capturing from the air, this number goes to $200, $300 per ton. So there will always be a price and a compromise. Now, the issue and what we still need to be vigilant in something may happening is that all this cost will be probably be charged on top of the oil price that we charge today. So probably in the future, when we're going to sell a tank of oil to a particular customer, this customer say, okay, but I'm going to charge you a tax because you are giving me carbons, and then all this story for carbon credits may appear. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that area, but it will happen something like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Luigi. Moving on to the same next question. Will CCUS be implemented in all oil and gas projects so that it can be utilized to capture all emissions released during that specific project?
Yes, the application in all the projects will depend, of course, in the engineers and the leadership of every company. Of course, if they want to go into that route and inject CO2 into the oil reservoirs. Yeah? Not all the fields are candidates, yeah, because you have to see what is the price of the CO2, what are the conditions of your reservoir, what are the conditions of your infrastructure. So it might be a limited number of cases that we can apply. And also, there is also a limited number of supply close to where you can use the CO2. So there will be a balance, yeah. Every case will be different.
Yes, I agree. There's a lot of factors that has to be considered. And for the next question is Glory from SPE University of Nigeria. She said, "Thank you, sir, for your presentation. It's enlightening. My question is, you mentioned that we need to acquire energy-related skills. Please, are there some you could suggest for us?"
Okay, my key suggestion is to first be aware of what are your energy consumption, learn about the energy efficiency in your field and in your operations, and learn about the basic scale of combustions. I mean, you need to know even basic stuff like how much one car versus one plane is consuming in terms of CO2 and how many billion BTU. So we need to be energy aware of what does it mean a 1 BTU. Okay, so this is what we deliver to industry. Secondly, I mean, people, depending on your taste, you may want to go more into, okay, do you want to get and learn how to make more efficient fuels to the market, or do I want to think about non-hydrocarbon energy sources, which is also fine, or you want to make the current hydrocarbon process more efficient? So in all these areas, we're talking about energy transformation. We want to make it a process more efficient. We want to make it a process to get more with less resources.
Yes, you make a great point, Dr. Luigi. That's why we're here sharing awareness with all of us young professionals. And we have another question from Saeed, a Marco question. So it says, CCUS will account for about 4 to 5%. Means of GHG reduction and latest IPCC reports is showing similar trends. What changes our policy will drive more CCUS similar to Northern Lights projects in Europe for NOC and IOC? So the question is, do you envision zero carbon oil possible at an economical scale or myth?
No, I think there is always a price. You remember the numbers I gave you. We will need to recover 35 million tons of CO2 per year if we want to make the oil industry net zero. Yeah, so this is a huge number, because this is like 1,000 times more projects than we're doing today. Is it possible? Is it a price? Yes. There is always the rhetoric that is it the oil industry responsible for all these CO2 emissions? That's another discussion for another day. But I think there is always a possibility to make a field fully sustainable. That means, for example, there are a couple of papers in SPE where they are generating hydrogen CO2 free out of a light oil field, for example. Yeah. So there is you always have enough energy to generate CO2 or to generate enough CO2 credit, okay, so that the net zero that you contribute to society is at zero. It will be more expensive, yes, it will be more expensive, but then we will be in another economy as well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And also, I want to highlight from the chat box, we have Suhail Diaz. She was our previous speaker for last Saturday for SPE Technical Talk about energy transition, and she told you that she thanks you for such an amazing presentation. And yeah, by this we finish the question and answer session. So thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Dr. Luigi, for your time to answer them. And now for our next session is a form of a quiz. So just, Yasharita, can you please show the QR code?
Okay, so there is no QR code. Instead, the Nwansha will share his screen.
All right, so just go to the www.kahoot.com and we will share the game pin with you. And yeah, it will be hosted by my teammate, Damasnia. Are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. First, let me share my screen. Okay, first, I'm Dharmawansha from SPE UIRAC, and now I'm gonna be the game master for this Kahoot session. So you guys can join through kahoot.id and enter the game pin. The game pin is 40624777. So now we're waiting for the participant. Okay, we got Amin, IG, Gomez.
Sorry, just to, I mean, while we're waiting for participants, could I just pose one question to Dr. Luigi as well?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Luigi. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed the talk. So I think maybe I misunderstand, but the CCUS, the current effort to implement it is like a mitigation procedure with regard to climate change. So do you think that it is ever possible for our industry to move from mitigative measures such as CCUS to preventative measures with regards to climate change? Or do you think that's not really possible given the nature of fossil fuels?
What do you call preventative measures? Like, for example,
So yeah, CCUS, we are aiming to like a net zero, right? Which means that we will end up emitting some carbon and we will end up putting it back in the ground. But is there anything that we can do to, prevent it totally rather than emitting any at all?
Yeah, as you saw in that slide, for example, for a country that makes 3 million barrels a day, you need to buy 5 times more of the CO2 that you generate, of the scope 1 and 2. Yes, it's definitely CCUS is one reactive measurement, if you say. The way to be proactive, or as you say, mitigating more into the future, would be that the oil industry is the process of decarbonization, which is one of the topics from last week and other topics that you can further investigate. I'm not particularly an expert in that area. It is, for example, how do you generate fuels that are less contaminants and is still coming from, for example, how do we generate more efficient hydrogen? So that will be the cherry on the cake, is the full hydrocarbon with no carbon. Yeah, that's the hydrogen. That's what everybody's going to. If we can generate hydrocarbon from any oil that we have on Earth, including gas, heavy oil, pet coke, there are many technologies that are coming along that will use hydrocarbon as the main feed. It will generate CO2 and it will generate clean hydrogen, all in a closed loop, so no CO2 emitted to the atmosphere, and the CO2 can be utilized in many things, stored in saline aquifers or use it in oil reservoirs to produce or increase the recovery factor.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, maybe we'll wait for another participant. All right, maybe we can start now. Okay, the first question. How much CO2 emission are generated yearly from all ONG activities? Okay, there is 7 person who write the answer. Okay, we move on to the next question. Oh yeah, this is scoreboard. The first one is the sunflower. Okay, follow with Gomis and Carabinieri. Okay, moving to the next question. When was the Paris Agreement signed? Is it 2010, 2015, 2020, or still not signed? Yep, the answer is 2015. Okay, sunflower is still leading. We move to the next question. What is the emission intensity in 1 barrel of oil?
Recording stopped.
Three, two, one, and yep, the answer is 405 kilogram CO2 per barrel of oil equivalent. Okay, we got 11 who get it right. Oh, the sunflower is down. The leaderboard is Carabinieri. Okay, next to the question. How much profit will CO2 EOR make if oil price is $50 per barrel, with CO2 cost is $40 per ton, and oil recovery efficiency is 300 kilogram per barrel? Three, two, one. Yep, only for people who got it right. Okay, for the scoreboard, Gomis is leading. We move to the next question. Which parameter could be important for CCUS pricing? Is it plant location, incentive or taxation, CCUS scale, or all the above? Three, two, one. Yep, the answer is all of the above. Okay, we move to the next. Now, Carabinieri is leading, followed by technician. Okay, next, the sixth question. Which parameter can impact the CO2 per case? Is it profit per barrel, water cut, GOR, and well condition, carbon credits, or all the above? Three, two, one. Yeah, only one who got it right. Okay, Carabinieri is still leading. The next question. What could be an example of CO2 reuse? Is it direct air capture, enhanced oil recovery, carbon to fuel, or energy efficiency? Three, two, one, and the answer is enhanced oil recovery. Okay. Okay, Gino is leading now. We move to the next question. In 2070, CCUS will account for what percentage of CO2 reduction? Is it 5%, 20%, 15%, or 80%? Three, two, 1, and the answer is 15%. Okay. For the next question, where could CO2 be stored? Is it aquifers and the reservoirs, tanks, oil-producing carbonates, or all of the above? Three, two, one, and the answer is all of it. Okay, now we move to the podium for the winner. The third one is technician. The second one is Gino. And the winner is Carabinieri. Okay, congratulations to the winner. I hope you enjoy it all. Back to you, Mariam.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the game session. I hope everyone had fun and learned something. So now let's move on to the photo session. I believe it's after the game session. So I want to ask everyone to please turn on their camera and use the virtual background that we provided in the meeting chat box. Yes, Glory, you raise your hand.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say this since I'm so sorry for interrupting this photo section. I wanted to say, is Dr. Luigi still there?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to say I feel like I've met Tony Stark. I don't know. I could just tell people that, I've met Tony Stark. I don't know what you want to say, but then I'm just happy that I was here in this class today. When I saw your picture, I was excited. I was like, oh, even if I don't get to meet Tony Stark of Marvel Studios, I think I'll meet his doppelganger then. It's nice to meet you, sir. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. And yeah, so let's move to the photo session. So please, everyone, turn on your video so I can remember this amazing session. Okay.
Okay, so I will be taking the screenshots.
Okay, great. So let me do the countdown.
Okay, so anybody else want to turn their camera on?
Okay, so I'm just gonna count from 3 and then we can pause. So 3, 2, 1.
One more time, Mariam.
Okay, one more time.
CCUS. Say CCUS.
CCUS. Okay, so let's go. 3, 2, 1. CCUS. Okay. Great. Oh, CCUS. Okay, now I get it.
to smile, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the photo session. So yeah, please fill up the feedback form. The link will be provided to you in the chat box if you want to receive your certificate of participation later. And yeah, so Shalita, do we have a QR code for the Google form?
1 second.
Yeah, you can share the screen.
Oh, wait. I'm having a little trouble with my bandwidth here, so.
All right, great. We can see your screen now. So everyone just scan the QR code provided in the screen. It will automatically take you to the form that you have to fill. And meanwhile, if you want to rewatch this session, you can easily access it through SPE APU Student Chapter YouTube or SPE Kuala Lumpur Young Professional Section YouTube channel as well. Both of the links will be provided in the chat box as well. All right, great. I believe everyone has accessed the form. Moving forward. Okay, so we're having our closing remarks now. I give the floor to Dr. Luigi for closing remarks.
No, I am very pleased with this session. I really congratulate you that you are doing for all the students and linking all the sections. I've been in SPE with 25 years, and I think this is one of the best initiatives I've seen in terms of student sections. Yeah, congratulations. I like to see it. I like the quiz very much, how they participated and how they answered, and it also gives me some feedback on how to tune the slides and the presentation. Yeah? My pleasure to serve you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luigi. We couldn't have done this without your participation today. So really appreciate that. And yes, so I would like to thank everyone that has joined us today. And I hope we have left today with more knowledge. And yes, so thank you everyone for joining. Have a great weekend ahead.
Students are linking all the sections. Yes.
And yeah, so that's the end of Saturday for SPE Technical Talks. It's been a good month. A lot of challenges and a lot of knowledge also has been shared. So thank you, everyone. I hope I see you soon in next events.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luigi.